Everyone, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I love talking to podcasters because A, they're the best people in the world. I am one, so I guess that means... Anyways, it's great to have Brigitte on the podcast as my guest co-host today. You're going to fall in love with her. She has an amazing story. I've had her on my other podcast in the past, and what a great person to talk to. It's just celebrating her birthday, but also another anniversary as well, which I'd love to touch on because it's a big part of her story. You're going to meet one of the nicest people in the world on the podcast today. So my guest co-host, Brigitte, is on the podcast. Brigitte, welcome to the How to Podcast series as my guest co-host.
Awesome, David. I really appreciate it. And the whole thing that we need to appreciate every single day. And that's kind of why I think people love listening to other stories. And that's
I love it.
Kind of circles around to why I started my podcast. And I guess you mentioned my other celebration. Yesterday was my birthday, but also my other celebration is I had, people think I'm weird, but I did some major cancer surgery on my 49th birthday 10 years ago because I didn't want to deal with this again. It was my second breast cancer diagnosis. And that just definitely, when you experience something like that, or not just cancer, but anything in your life, it definitely makes you look at things a little differently and appreciate life. And that's what's all focused around, like why I wrote that book. And it's an offshoot of my podcast, which is called Real Things Living, because we focus so much, a lot of people focus so much on getting stuff and, what's the word? I should say bougie.
Yeah.
Whatever. If you like that, fine, good for you. But I never really was into that. And that's why, to me, it's more about experiences, not an actual physical thing. And I'm not sure where I got real things, why I came out with that. Who knows? Maybe it was during chemo, right? I don't know. Your brain goes in different places when you're going through cancer treatment.
Yeah. So you have a lot of great guests on your podcast. Talk a little bit about your idea to go with guests compared to doing a solo podcast. Like, why is guesting and having guests on your show important for you?
Well, I learned that I'm learning more from other people. Originally, I was doing just me and doing occasional people. And I do have occasional solo stuff, but my background is in publishing, and a lot of my guests, majority, are authors. And so a lot of them want to share their story and why they wrote a book. And it's fantastic what they're doing. And I love the authenticity of those conversations that I'm having. And I've had good feedback from other people that they like yours too, David. I don't have a list of questions for you, right? We just have an idea of what you want to go around, because that's where you kind of go off the path a little bit. And that's where I think it's more important.
Yeah. It's a real conversation, and the listener benefits.
Yes.
Right? Because it feels like, if it feels too scripted, it feels like as a listener, I'm a little bit out of the loop. Like, it looks like you guys planned this, and it's too perfect almost sometimes, which is fine. If that's how you do it, great. But when you can have a conversation and it's not, clearly you can tell that the two people you're listening to, they don't even know what the next question is. And you're just following the topics and following conversation. It's great.
I think it's embracing the moment, because you don't know where it's going to go. I always like about focusing on curiosity and being creative. That's kind of my background. That's what I like to do. It makes me happy, and other people like it too. And you mentioned the word perfect. I used to be guilty of that, David. I wouldn't do something if it wasn't perfect. And I don't know what that comes from, maybe the generation. But I've learned it's better to put it out there. People are more in tune or connected to you when there's a little, hiccup maybe, but it's not perfect and they like it.
When imperfect people pursue perfection, it feels like a dog chasing its own tail.
Yes.
Right? It's never going to catch it. It's never going to be a success, because you're always in that loop of, I'm trying to do a perfect thing, but I'm not a perfect person. So it's almost impossible.
That's what I learned. And that's one of the reasons why the podcasting, I was afraid at first, David, to do it. This is my 5th year of doing it. And I was worried, but people are giving me good feedback. Okay, so I'm just being myself and having the guests on, and I like just talking to different people. And my podcast is really about focuses on resilient stories, right? That's what we aren't born with resilience. You kind of have to get knocked down and
Yeah.
get up. And that's really what a lot of my stories are, not mine, the guests. And that's a lot of books are real popular in this. And also podcasting is a good way to help market a book. I think that's why people reach out to me actually to talk about their book, but I don't accept everybody because it needs to be in line with what my podcast is about.
Yeah. I love it. How have you grown as a person because of your podcast?
More confidence, believe it or not. And
Good.
it does it, even though people say I'm confident, but it's still you're putting yourself out there. But I'm okay with it. And people want that authenticity. And I started originally just audio, David, in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then during COVID is when people wanted to see more faces. And I think more people are doing these video. So that's why what we're using is Zoom. You can record video and audio at the same time. So that makes life easier. But that's what it is. I became more confident, believe it or not, because you feel like after what I've been through, like, what value do I have? And it's providing, everybody has value in life. And finding I didn't realize how just people like talking to me. And so there you go.
Okay, so I'm going to hijack the podcast here for a second.
Yeah.
I do what I call my like a question of the month thing to my audience, to my community. And I ask people to call into my SpeakPipe link, which is on my website, leave a voice message. And basically, I have a question that I ask my group, my community, and I just kind of solicit answers to the question.
Oh, perfect.
At the same time, I want people to promote their podcast.
Yes.
Okay, so if I was answering it, I'd be like, hi, this is Dave from the How to Podcast series. And the answer to the question of the month, this is my answer, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Right. So I'm going to hijack and I'm going to insert it here and have you do it for me in real time. Okay. So I'm going to have you then respond again, tell me the name of your podcast, that kind of thing, and then answer this question. Are you ready to do this?
Okay, I'll do my best.
Okay, and I'm putting you on the spot completely, and I totally understand. So the question of the month simply is, how many podcast episodes do you listen to on average in a week? Total. Okay, so I want you to kind of frame that, though think about that for a second. Like total, like again, on average, not like some weeks more, some weeks less, but on average, I listen to X number of months. So I want you to respond with, hi, this is Brigitte from Real Things Living, and then answer the question. And I'm going to take this section out, and I'm going to do a special episode about this. Perfect. Okay, so you ready? Think about it. Okay. You good?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to flip it to you, and you're going to do the answer. You ready?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, go.
Hi, I'm Brigitte Cutshall. I'm the host of Real Things Living podcast. And on average, I listen to 6 episodes each week. Not just my podcast, other podcasts. How's that?
I love it. Awesome. That's great, Brigitte. See, that's exactly what I needed. Thank you. So you're going to be part of another episode as well, just by doing that. So that's one thing I like is engagement, right? I want to hear from my audience.
I listen, I use that number because I like the number 3 and 6. It's something in my brain. I like those numbers. And I know that's kind of maybe OCD, whatever.
Awesome. Yeah, because I just wanted to get an idea of how many, because I think on average what I heard is most, like outside of the podcasting world as podcasters, but as just listeners of podcasts, between 6 to 8, roughly as an average. Yeah, for people that listen to episodes. For me, I work a night job. And then I have free Wi-Fi and nobody talks to me. I work by myself. So I have like I get 40 hours of podcast listening a week.
Wow.
Right? Where I can just listen. I can binge like an entire podcast.
That's awesome.
It's so good.
I would probably listen to more if I had to commute, but I work remotely. There's a little difference there. And I think those that listen to more, like you said, you work at night, those that are commuting probably listen to more.
And when you listen to podcasts, where are you listening? Like, what are you doing as you listen?
Most of the time I'm cooking.
Okay, there you go.
I'm in the kitchen, if that makes sense, because
Yeah.
I've always, when you're cooking, you can't be staring at something. You got to be like, you know, that's what it is. And I cook a lot at home because I'm one of those people. I like to cook. So
Yeah.
that's just me.
So back to the video audio comment earlier, you're not actually doing a video podcast in that moment. You're doing it more audio
I'm doing
focused.
audio when I'm cooking.
You're right.
But
Okay.
but there are times when I have some downtime, I'll watch the video and I will watch it on YouTube.
There you go. So there's options then.
Yeah, there's options. And I had mentioned to you, it's becoming very popular, these video podcasts. I had mentioned
Yeah.
earlier that I learned that Jon Stewart is starting one once a week on YouTube. It's called the Weekly Show with Jon Stewart. And
Okay.
I like his perspective. And I think that is just shows you it's an example. Celebrities, I consider him a celebrity,
Yeah.
are really doing this as well. They're getting a lot. They understand the benefit of it.
I'll put a link to that because I want to check that out too. Thank you for bringing that up. That's great. I love him too. He's hilarious and he's got
Yes.
great insights.
Yeah.
Really good.
And it's because earlier before this call, during lunch, David, I was looking at, before I got on this, because I looked at YouTube because I was eating my lunch. That's kind of, nobody's around me. I already did my walk this morning, that kind of thing. And I think when I don't, since my kids are adults, that's less of a distraction. I think it depends. Like my audience are usually not just women, but people over 40, 45
Okay.
for me.
Yeah. Okay. So when you first started your show, how did you learn how to do all this?
I blame it on Seth Godin. I joke on that because he's somebody that I've always admired and I've read his blog for many years. And I think he started it in the late 2000s, like 2008 or 9, something like that. And I've always followed him. And he is the one that convinced me, even though I'm in the publishing background, to write my first book. He has a book called It's Your Turn. And David, he actually designed it himself. He was honest about it. He tries different things, but his background is marketing. And then I think a few years later, after his book came out, he started to write about talking about podcasting. And I really didn't really know about it because I really didn't in the late, like I said, I started mine in 2019.
Yeah.
I think he was talking about it in 2018. And
Yeah.
he had he was offering, I knew him, by the way, connected to him. So he mentioned this and I'm like, I'm going to try this and understand this because I thought it was important. And I thought it was in my mind when I read that blog post, like I could turn my book, that's what I did, into a podcast because of the positive feedback I got. And I took a class that was called the Podcast Fellowship, hosted by Seth Godin. I don't think he does it anymore, but it was online again. And he was on some of the calls. He had like a teacher. I don't remember who it was, but I met so many great people on there. And we were just supporting each other because we were newbies, right? Rather than, we had some experienced people involved, but the newbies, we were really supporting each other. And then we were learning, and mainly it was like the right kind of equipment to have. And you didn't, and he was telling us, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to, the key is to be consistent.
Yeah.
That's really what it was about. And choose a topic. He didn't say you had to niche down too much.
Yeah.
But it just depends on, I already had an audience, David, from my blog and my book. And so that kind of helped me. And to have my other cheerleaders in my podcast fellowship, we were cheering each other on. And you just need that encouragement. And that's being involved with other people, connecting with other people like that.
Yeah.
In a similar situation, you're going to get through something and you can just give each other feedback.
I love it. What was your initial connection with Seth? I'm really curious on how that happened.
I got his book and then I sent him a copy of my first book. I said, this is your fault. No, I was kidding. and then he responds to emails and letters. That's just how kind he is. And then he offered a the alt MBA, I was part of the beta group. And I asked my husband, I said, is this okay if I spend $3,000 to be part of this group? Because it was after a year after my cancer. Because I'm like,
Yeah.
something about the vibe. And that's kind of how I got more in contact with him. And I don't know if you're familiar with alt MBA, but it
No.
was, they don't, I think they stopped doing it, but it was like getting a group of people together, kind of in every week we had a cohort, he called cohorts. We were learning from each other and just, he was pushing books, which I loved, David. I meant like
Yeah.
learning from nonfiction books. And our
Yeah.
first group were people that, one of them was like she's now vice president of Penguin Random House, but right, she and I mean, just unbelievable amount of friends you would connect with, and an artist and a famous speaker. But Seth had us jump around each week. It was for 1 month, and I was just made you think differently, and
Yeah.
that's really what it was. And then Seth, you would write. We would share our writing on a platform. I don't remember what it was, sorry, but it was
Yeah.
a while ago. He would respond and give feedback on writing, and especially my writing. I wanted to faint, so he was making me feel better. I mean, a faint in a good way. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
because I'm one of his fans.
Yeah.
So then I got to meet him, and they had a get together later. I got to go meet him in New York a couple of times. He came here in Atlanta to do a speech, and one of my other friends I met through all NBA in Atlanta, she said, "Hey, Seth, we're going to come watch you." And he said, "Sure." And he let us go in his I should call it dressing room, but the speaker's room, one-on-one with him. He was just loving it. He remembered me. He asked me how I'm
Wow.
doing. How is my cancer, recovering?
Come on.
That just shows you how much he remembers people.
Yeah.
And that's why he's a true marketer, right? And well, I should say marketer, excuse me, that didn't come out right, but you know what I meant. That's how he was, very genuine and authentic. And I've made such great friends from everybody else. And then one of the guys I met here in Atlanta is called Business Radio X. He's one of the founders. He did podcasting. He started a long time ago. He is, at least 12 years ago.
Wow.
Business Radio X, and he brings in local businesses in the Atlanta area. And he brought me in one time because I met him through, and I was just like fawning over that. But it was just means a lot. But he didn't charge me any, he doesn't charge
Yeah.
people, but he gets like sponsorships for
Yeah.
certain things to make keep his stuff rolling. But he has a studio. It's just amazing. Just you don't know how many people you're going to impact. And I think when you and I spoke previously, David, I don't want to, I mean, sure, I want to help millions of people, but just helping one. I like the domino effect. I think that's one of the books I think Seth wrote about was called The Domino Effect, or at least a book he recommended. He always recommended to think outside the box. And that's kind of how we're going to solve, I shouldn't say problems, but come up with different solutions, because there's not always one. And I'm similar mindset, with him. And he just, like I said, I was just tore me up in a good way, that he remembered me from all, and in my writing and my cancer history. And that just shows you the kind of, he listens. That's really what it's all about. He listens and doesn't react, and then he'll respond in a proper manner. But he's always kind. And I met so many awesome people through him.
So, okay, before we hit record, you brought up, we discussed something that I wanted to talk about, and you agreed with me, and you just set the foundation for that.
Yeah.
I don't even think you realized you did it, but you did such a great job that in social media, that podcasting can be a form of social media. And I think that we talked about that social media is, that podcasting is social media done right, in the sense that we're putting social back into social media.
Yes.
Right? So you've built this foundation now. So the way Seth treated you
Yes.
as a member of his community was different than a heart, a like, a thumbs up on social media, which seems kind of transactional. What he did with you in that moment, asking you about your treatment and treating you like a true human being and true connection, meant more to you than a like or a follow.
Yes,
Right?
it's true.
So I think podcasting can be much more of a more impactful social media platform or avenue than Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all these things. They're great, but podcasting is different. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. And that's why originally I got the idea to do it through Seth, but using my book, Real Things, 6 Ways to Embrace Life, my first book, as the baseline for me, for my content. And that's what they were recommending in that podcast fellowship. And that's when I learned that it was just simple. It's more simple. I shouldn't say simple, but easier than I expected. And I started sharing like, hey, I'm doing it. And I had people reaching out to me. I haven't reached out to other people. Isn't that kind of cool? So people are coming to me, can so-and-so. I have like agencies reaching out to me because I'm being authentic. I'm being Brigitte. I am mimicking Seth, but in Bridgette's way. And I don't get a whole lot of comments on the actual other platforms, but I have people reach out to me, if that makes sense, via email mostly. Yeah. And podcasting is just changing. You got to be flexible, but it's changing. But I do like that how we're saying it is what social media. It's what we should do and focus on that and helping people and not about I want you to buy my book, but it's not about selling something. And it's also a more, I shouldn't say collaborative marketing perspective too. That's kind of how I look at it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the way Seth treated you all through your journey with him, from you being a fan to you having time with him one-on-one, that's an amazing story alone. Yeah. How have you been able to model how Seth treated you for how you treat your community and your listening audience? What are you doing that you've learned from him that works for you as now the content creator?
I'm giving them some good feedback, positive feedback, making them feel valued. That's really what it is. That's kind of what I learned. I'm like, he made me feel I have value here. And so I'm doing that to those people who reach out to me. And they're just so grateful to even have the opportunity to, if they have a book they want to talk about. And it's just about sharing their stories. And I learned from empathy. You've got to be empathetic. We're all different. Right. You need to that's why listening, I've learned to be better at listening. It did help that my background was business development. So you got to listen anyway. But for some reason, I didn't feel valued sometimes. And Seth made that. So I'm trying to do the same thing to my listeners and to people who reach out to me who need help with something or assistance, I should say.
So there was a point for you with Seth that you're like, oh my gosh, it's Seth. I get to talk to Seth. I can't believe it. I listen to his podcast. I read his books. I'm so like, oh my gosh, it's Seth. But now the same thing is happening for your audience when it's like, oh my gosh, it's Brigitte.
Exactly.
Like I get to talk to Brigitte. Like I can't believe this. Right. They're having the exact same moment you had for Seth. Your audience has with you.
Yes.
What does that mean to you? Like, how does that encourage you? How does that help you to continue podcasting, writing your books? What does that mean for you when somebody reaches out and says, Brigitte, I love your podcast. I love this.
It definitely encourages me to continue and to make sure it's also validating that what I am doing is helping people. Yeah. And you do have to tweak. That's another thing Seth would say. If it's not, if you're not getting good validation, then you have to tweak it a little bit. Or I should say tweak, but pivot. But I'm getting that kind of that feedback I wasn't expecting. I'm not doing it just like you said to get likes. I'm doing it to help people and to show that they do have value. And I went to a wedding over the weekend and I saw someone who knows my son and they were like, it's her, Mrs. Cutshall, and she's got a podcast. And I was not I was there for a wedding, not about me. You know what I'm saying? So that made me smile. I'm like, yes, it does go both ways. It helps each other, me and that person. We do have value. And it shows that being authentic in the long run, that's how I look at it. You want to help in the long run. And you do have to, you're going to have some bad moments. Things aren't perfect, right? That's what we were talking about earlier. And it's okay. You've got to remember it's okay. And I feel like I'm everybody's mom sometimes. But I think that's the mom in me coming out. And I don't know why that's my personality. I think I like to nurture
Hmm.
and I think it's okay. And I am embracing being me. And I want them to be them, whatever they want me to nurture. And again, I'm learning just to pause before, and that's what I've learned to just pause before you react. Don't react and be patient.
There's a shirt idea there. You could be the
Yes,
pod mom,
yes,
right?
I am the pot. Oh, I'm writing that down. I can be
There you do. Write that down. You're the
well,
pod mom.
I do have a shirt that says dog mom.
There you
So
go.
with
Pod
pause, so I
mom.
can have pod mom with the microphone.
Well, there you go. Okay, so as your newly branded pod mom, can you talk to the audience that are like struggling to get started? They're afraid of their own voice. They're afraid of failure. Who's going to listen to me? All those things that we wrestle with in the early days of podcasting. As the newly branded pod mom, can you talk to the audience that is struggling right now? Because they're here and they're like, "Oh, it's easy for you, Bridget, because you're doing great. But for me, you don't understand how hard it is for me to do the thing that you're telling me to do." What do you say as the newly branded pod mom? What do you say?
That's funny. I definitely would recommend that you start off doing some short audio. You know what I'm saying? That way you just get the fear out of you a little bit.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure which platform to recommend to people. It doesn't matter really, I don't think.
yeah,
But that's really what it is. I would recommend you start off doing short talks. And you might want to have a little tiny script. You know what I'm saying? Just because you just want to get more comfortable with the situation. And you can also, if you can afford it, maybe have someone help you with the editing of it. That would help. But that to me, it's not critical. I think it's funny when you have some flaws in there. So it just depends on your personality. But
yeah.
yeah, just do audio clips first. I shouldn't say clips, but like, 2 to 3 minutes. I've seen people who do that all the time.
Yeah.
And
It's
that's what
it's
I
called
recommend.
practice, right?
It's
It's all
just called
practice.
progress. Yeah, I wasn't always doing this, guys,
Yeah.
but
Right.
it's my fifth year, and I was terrified. But I mean, I got through it, and so did David.
Yeah.
You just gotta. It's about being consistent, and I believe in taking small steps, and then when you're more comfortable, you can do longer, and you can talk to somebody if you want, ask them questions if they want to be on your podcast. Just depends on what
Yeah.
the topic's about.
It's like somebody sitting in the stands at NASCAR, watching the cars go zipping by at incredible speeds
Yeah.
and going, I don't have a driver's license and I've never driven a car, but I think I could do that.
Yes, you can.
Right? It's like, so I'm just going to go down, jump in a car and jump on the track. It's like, and I expect to be perfect on the first lap.
Yeah, you're
It's like,
not.
wait a minute. You should probably learn how to drive a car first
Yes,
before you go and sign up to be a NASCAR driver.
right.
And in podcasting, people think, well, it seems easy. Bridget can do it. She does it great. I can do this. And I should have the same success that Bridget has with her X number of episodes in my one episode. I should be like, jump in and be perfect. And it's called practice. You have to
Yes, it's
drive a
practice.
car to get to the point where you can drive it that fast
Right.
and turn left on a consistent basis. You have to practice. So don't think that you're going to be perfect right out of the gate,
Right.
episode one, and have the same success as somebody that you admire in podcasting. You got to put in the laps. You got to try. You got to practice. You're going to hit the wall. You're going to crash. You're going to make a mistake. But it's how you rebound and how you regroup
Right.
and how you come back and what did you learn, right?
I think my first podcast was about what I was doing. I have to go back and listen to it, but then I also got some good feedback on that. And they liked it. It's people through my alt MBA cohort, my group, and
Yeah.
my podcast group. They were given you might want to consider something like that, finding a group to be a part of, because you can give each other feedback, and it's a community. And I think connecting, if you're not feeling comfortable by yourself, find a community of other newbies,
Yeah.
be a part of it. That will give you some confidence. It's just, again, like you mentioned, like the driving. It's same with like running. I'm a runner still, and I gotta practice. You can't just.
Yeah.
You can't just go out there and do a long run right away. You just got a little, I call it small steps. And
Yeah.
it's same with cooking, everything that you do.
Everything. Everything. It touches everything. You go buy a microphone and think you're a podcaster because you have a microphone. I buy a pair of running shoes and now I can run a marathon. No, you can't.
can't.
Dave. You can't. You can't do that. You're going to be
Right.
cramping up and hurting in 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
So, right, it takes time to build up the ability to podcast. So take your time, relax.
Yeah.
There's a long path here.
As you were saying, it made me think it got stretching. Starting off makes you stretch, get your muscles ready for your
Right.
your voice and everything. You just gotta. Another thing I recommend too is make sure you hydrate. Drink a lot before you get on. David probably knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's what I've
Exactly.
learned too. Otherwise, you don't want your mouth to get dry. And just little simple things like that.
Yeah.
You gotta make sure you have something to drink and I don't really think it's a big deal of what kind of microphone you have, but you just got to practice.
Yeah.
You just got to
Yeah.
small steps and put it out there. And another, like I mentioned, find a community that you can be a part of, or even if you're brave enough to do it by yourself, go for it. But get some people to listen and give you feedback too.
Yeah.
I mean, you can
And before you go down the path of how to podcast, even though that's the name of
Yes.
my show,
Yeah.
it's more about the why to podcast.
Yeah, why are you podcasting?
Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Why are you even interested? Because if you come in and say, I want to make money with a podcast, that's a different track
Yes.
than I want to share and meet people, or I want to promote my book, or I want to get on stages as a speaker. Those
Right.
are all different paths
Yes.
that you can pick. And you can jump from one path to another, but it's going to take some work. So just at the very beginning, think about why am I doing this before the how to do it. I
Correct.
think is important.
Yeah, the why is important. And that's what mine was like. People like my first book that I was telling you about. And that's
Yeah.
why I did it. And everybody liked the idea. And originally I was just talking to other cancer patients, but then it pivoted a little bit to other people who've had other big obstacles, right, to pick themselves up. And some of it was amazing, freakier stuff than I've dealt with. I shouldn't say freaky.
Yeah.
But they
Tough,
just
yeah.
felt, people like me and them, we can just really connect because we understand what's going on. And for my podcast, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Really connect with each other. And that brings out the genuine conversation.
So the other question I get quite often, Brigitte, is around how to grow my show. I've been podcasting for a certain length of time. I'm seeing downloads. I'd like to see more, but I'm seeing downloads. I'm on the right path. Every episode I'm getting better. I'm getting better at this. But how do I grow my show? Like, how do I get more listeners? Do you have any things that you do to help promote your podcast or get out in front of new people?
Well, what I have done is I have clips created and I put those clips on like Instagram or LinkedIn. That's where I don't use X, whatever it's called, Twitter. I don't really because I'm not on there. So I'm not engaged, but I'm more engaged with LinkedIn. And that's how people have found me. And then I do have on my blog, I will mention a podcast episode. And a lot of times, what's helped me, I think, the agencies have reached out to me for their guests. They're helping spread. I mean, they're coming to me, which is of value, right? To have one of their clients on. And so they're spreading it. But at a minimum, you need to just talk about it. You need to tell your friends and family. And if you do have an Instagram account, you should put a clip on there because you have heard of thumbnail images and blah, blah. I shouldn't say blah, blah, blah. But people are more engaged when I have a clip that sees us talking or me talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Or hear you talking rather than just a thumbnail image. That's
Yeah.
what has helped me. But I had to be consistent. It wasn't just, random stuff. You have to be consistent.
I like it. What was maybe one unique thing that's happened because of your podcast that you didn't think when you first started your show, you didn't even think this could even be a possibility. It wasn't in your mind, but something happened and it gave you a new opportunity. Something because of your show, something exciting happened for you. Is there any cool things that you didn't anticipate as a podcaster?
That's an interesting question. I've had some idea to write another book.
Good.
Because you're having a conversation and it puts ideas into my head and then you got to keep notes. That's really what it was. I got the book, the idea to write my book, the most recent one called Move for You, because it's empowering a healthy, happy life through exercise. Because I never thought about doing that. I didn't want to, everybody is different, meaning what makes them happy. I should say happy, what makes them make it movement fun. And I was talking to a couple of other cancer patients, and it was like, boom, it went off into my head. And did get permission from them if I could share their story in my book too, and I gave them credit for putting this idea into my head. And I like to converse. I like to write, and that's just me. I'm a communicator, but I never had that idea until these people were talking to me about their stories.
Yeah. I love it. For me, I've never really saw myself as a media person, like a reporter.
Right.
Like those people on TV, they look so professional and great, and I'm just a guy in my basement. But I had an email come into my inbox recently, and it said, potential guest for your show. And I'm like, oh, here we go. And I start reading it, and it's like, this person has a new book about their father. They'd love to come on and talk about their book and their journey. And I'm reading through it, and I'm looking at the name of the guest, and I'm like, why is that so familiar? And I'm like, wait a minute. His last name is Nimoy.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, wait a minute. It's Adam Nimoy, and his dad is Leonard Nimoy,
Wow.
Spock from Star Trek.
Wow.
And he wanted to come on my show. And I just interviewed him yesterday.
Awesome.
And it was like, I was so nervous. Because this guy does red carpets. He's a TV producer. He has a famous family. He's well known in the space, and he wanted to come on my show. And in that moment, I'm like, my wife's like, see, like podcasting opens doors for you.
Yes.
There is no reason he would ever want to talk to me if I didn't have a podcast.
Correct.
Right. So now I have this connection with this great person, and we had an awesome conversation and talked about things that he doesn't talk about with the regular news outlets.
You're right.
And he gave me an hour of his time where he usually does 15-minute interviews.
Wow.
Right, for all the different TV shows.
Gave you an hour. Wow.
An hour with me. He was on one of my favorite shows, Big Bang Theory. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've seen you on television. Now you're on my screen, just you and me. Like, what a surreal moment. I'm like, at the beginning, I got to get this out of the way. I loved your appearance on Big Bang. And he started smiling. He's like, yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I'm like, this is a real human being on my screen, even though he has a lot of famous connections and background. At the end of the day, we're just two human beings connecting over a podcast.
Good point. That's
right. And that was something I didn't anticipate when I hit record on my first episode many years ago. That it would open the door to make connections in real social connections. Like we talked about putting social back in social media. It helped me to make connection with people that I would never have the chance to do so otherwise. So that's something that I didn't anticipate, but has really made me stop and go, podcasting is powerful.
It is.
For what you can do with a podcast.
I just, after you said that, I did have someone reach, they were on my podcast. She was a celebrity on Love is Blind here, and like what? And so she was on. She and I, we have so much in common. She lives in Atlanta, and so we're gonna get connected in person. And it's just, and I've had a couple of professional athletes, but they come, and I love sports. I'm just, I'm not a football player, but I've had that kind of stuff. Right, I never in a million years, but they've had things to overcome. Right. That's why I focus on resilience. But right, you just don't know who you're going to have. And then I wrote the other book. I just love like the social aspect of what we're doing here. This is so helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And now I have you in my life, the official pod mom. So I'm excited to have you. Right. You got a shirt. We got to get a shirt for that. But I'm just saying, it's so cool how you can connect with people, hear people's stories, give them the platform, possibly. When I look through your guests, not all of these guests have the same level of platform. Some of them are new, some have been around for a long time. but you're treating them all the same way.
Yes,
and I love that's how you do your show.
Yeah, they have value to me. And then I just want them to feel, because it kind of subconsciously goes back to how Seth made me feel valued, right? And that's I want to return. It's giving it, you got to give it back to the others. You've got to, and I've learned, I think my stepfather was that way. I think I learned a lot from him. He was a military guy, West Pointer, Special Forces and all that, but he was so kind to everybody. Now, I don't want to be against him in battlefield, but,
No.
But that's one of the other books I wrote too is about him when he passed away unexpectedly. I called that one Expecting the Good. That's what he put into our head, and it was about people like that book because it was military guy, the aspect around home, and not just about battle. Right? Not about fighting all the time, because these guys need their family. And that's maybe subconsciously all these experiences have come out in me to try to show the positive in the world. And I've been made fun of, David, because of my positivity. And I'm like, so I just smile and give him the middle finger and walk away. Just kidding. Not literally, but in my mind. But that's how I'm kidding. Not really. Yeah, but I just smile. When my son has a picture. I think it's of Julia. God, what's that girl? She's famous actress. She had a big smile. But my son said, "This is my mom before she smacks me." The big smile, big smile. Anyway, you just got to be yourself. And that's kind of why I'm glad you're noticing that, David, that I want to help everybody if they're, especially a new author. Okay. Because I understand how hard it was to write that damn book. Excuse me. I cursed.
Yeah.
But it's hard. And so I understand that. And that's why authors have come to me, and it does help them. I'm not saying there's just so many ways how to spread your message out there. And I just want people to share their stories. And I think I mentioned to you before, I have a quiz. I had a quiz created on what storytelling method are you comfortable with? Because people, they want to share their story, but they're not, do I write a book? Do I do a speech? Do I do a podcast? There's just so many and there's just little things you got to think about. But I think a really great way right now, because of our tech environment, it's good, is a podcast. And you can just, so many ways you can absorb it. And like me, I cook, right? and you're working.
Yeah. Right. It's great. I love it. Okay, so we could keep talking all day, but I know you have things to do. So again, let's close off, Brigitte, with where to find you, where to listen to your podcast, maybe what's a good episode to start with, like if there's one that comes to mind, or just start at the beginning or start at the most recent, whatever you want. But where should we start listening to your show? All of that information, we'll put it all in the show notes as always, of course. But kind of, again, let's talk again about the podcast as we close off, and let's get you some new listeners for your show as well. I appreciate
it. The best way to find me is my website, Brigitte Cutshall, Brigitte Cutshall. I have an Instagram account, the same name, and LinkedIn, the same name. And I also have a YouTube channel called Real Things Living. And my podcast is called Real Things Living. And then it's on every platform. Basically, it's on Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Those are the ones I listen to actually are Spotify.
Yeah.
But there's also iHeart. And I'm trying to think of the best podcast episode for you to listen to. I would recommend the one that Jerry Bolander, he has a book that he was released earlier this year. He wrote it because his wife passed away, and he wrote it as a male caregiver, and he was being really authentic, and we really connected. And I asked him, by the way, David, I said, how did you find me? And he said on Listen Notes. I'm sure you're familiar with Listen Notes.
Yeah.
So my podcast is ranked up there. I did not know that it even existed. I didn't know, right? I mean, I have someone help me with my podcast, but I don't, I'm just learning even from my own guests. Because that's what I ask people too, David. If I do
That's
have
a good question to ask.
like,
Yeah.
where did you find me? How did you learn about me? That's kind of that way I know if I'm doing the promoting it correctly or marketing it correctly.
Smart. And then do more of whatever the answer is.
Yes, and do that.
Right.
And that people have, like I mentioned, a lot of times find me on LinkedIn because I post clips.
Good.
And that's where my background has been business to business. But then I started doing this, but I'm getting a lot of authors and other publishers and things like that come to me.
So you're going to have to go into your LinkedIn now and update your profile and be the pod mom
I love
as well.
I'm going to say it's all David. It's David Campbell's fault. I'm kidding.
You're
I am going to do that. I'm going to put that in my header. Pod mom. have a designer create a logo for me.
And then you need the shirt. And I need to see that picture on Instagram or somewhere
I will.
so that I can share it as well. That's amazing.
I will do that. See, we had this conversation and I got a new hashtag too, PodMom.
There you go. I love it. I'm going to put that hashtag here in the podcast so people can follow as long.
Popular hashtag.
I love it. It's great. So one thing I would ask that you do come back in the future, Pod Mom, and come back on the show and give us an update and all that. I loved our conversation and I loved talking to you. And again, congratulations on your birthday. Congratulations on the anniversary of all of the things that have happened in your life. You just, the smile on your face and the joy that you bring to our conversation is something that I think we can feel, even if we're listening and we can't see what's happening right now. You can hear the smile.
Thank you.
As you talk.
Thank you.
And I think that is something that you're gifted with. And I love your podcast. I love your podcast. I love what your books. I love what you do.
Thank you.
And I'm just here to celebrate you. So, Brigitte, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, David. You're making me tear up. This is beautiful. Thank you.
I love it. Everyone go and listen to the podcast, rate, review, share, do all that stuff to help Brigitte grow her podcast and her community. Support her, buy her books, share this episode with someone. Because there's someone listening to this that maybe is on that journey and they're struggling with a cancer diagnosis and they're looking for inspiration. Here you go.
Right,
Brigitte is inspiration in a bottle. She is just amazing. So go reach out and share her podcast so people can be supported in that as well. The official Pod Mom on the podcast. It's so great to have you, Brigitte. Thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you again.
Hey, thanks for being here on the How to Podcast series. Glad to have you on the show with us, listening in. And hope they're finding value in the podcast. I hope you're finding something that helps you with your show, helps you with the tools and the information from these amazing guest co-hosts through our daily Daves and these solo episodes. The variety of what we're doing here on the podcast is all designed for you so that you can get the tools you need to create your podcast and keep going with your show. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing this. And I'm glad you're here finding value in this. If you would like to do a little bit more than just be a listener, if you want to do community with podcasters, we have a thing called our Meetup on meetup.com. You can come find us and there'll be a link on our website at howtopodcast.ca and you can come and join in on our Meetup. Instead of just being a listener, you could actually participate and come in and join other podcasters, just like you, at your stage, at your level, where you're at right now. And then other podcasters who are maybe a little further down the road, who can learn from you and you can learn from them. And we host these meetups on a regular basis. Again, go to howtopodcast.ca and you'll find all the information there. We'd love for you to come join us at our next meetup. The only thing we need at our next meetup is you. You're the only thing missing from all of this. So consider joining our meetups. Again, they're totally free on a regular basis, all through howtopodcast.ca. And I'd love to hear more from you about your podcast as well. There's a SpeakPipe link on howtopodcast.ca. Leave a message. I'd love to hear about you and your show and how we can work together to get your message into the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing the show with another podcaster that you're like, hey, I think you'd really like this episode. Go ahead, share the episode, and let's get more podcasters on the mic. Thanks for listening.